From money to mail, construction to containers, paper pervades our lives. In this episode of Hands-On History, we're going to chase the paper trail all the way from papyrus to the present day. I'll go to work in a mill that's nearly 150 years old. I'll make paper with giant machines and one sheet at a time, preserving ancient technologies and keeping my hands on history. Abraham Lincoln's re-election posters, the first edition of Tom Sawyer, and the United We Stand postage stamps commemorating the September 11th attacks all have two things in common. First, each is a true symbol of America. And second, each was printed on paper made right here at this paper mill in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania.
P.H. Glatfelter opened the mill in 1864. That was the same year it made paper for the Lincoln campaign. At the time, the mill produced 1,500 pounds of paper a day. Now it produces over 950 tons a day. It's a process that starts in the chip yard.
Hey, Roman, how are you? Ron.
Good.
Where are you coming from?
Paradise, Pennsylvania.
Paradise. How far away is that?
50 miles.
So what's in here? Can we open this up?
It's wood chips.
Wood chips?
Yeah.
What kind of wood?
Hardwood, mixed hardwood, all hardwood.
Okay. And this is from where? A mill somewhere?
Yeah, this is from the mill.
So what? This would have been the first couple cuts you make on a log. You can't use it.
Yeah.
They chip it up there.
Yeah, it's like the scrap wood.
Okay.
These chips have to be unloaded onto a conveyor system to be sorted. Believe it or not, the way they do that is by lifting the entire truck on its end.
So how heavy is this load of wood chips?
Around 80,000.
80,000 pounds. So now we're going to lift the whole thing, truck and trailer, up in the air.
To lift the truck, I pressed a button that signaled the tower and began the lifting.
Okay, there it goes.
I could hardly believe that this big rig remained stationary when it was standing almost straight up, dumping all those wood chips.
That is amazing. Just amazing. Look at that. It's up about 60 degrees now. You better stop there, Roman. Your truck's going to flip over on its back, I think. And here she comes down. I have never in my life seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
From here, the chips ride conveyor belts to a screening operation. The screens sort the pieces so that only those that are the right size make their way to the chip pile. Up on the pile, the chips are moved around with giant bulldozers like this one. I climbed up to the cab and met operator William Kurtz. He let me take the controls and do a little heavy lifting. I found out that the trick to working the pile is to make sure that you continue to feed the reclaimer, a conveyor system that carries the chips into the pulp mill, where wood begins its transformation into paper. Today, virtually all paper is made from wood, but it wasn't always that way. America's first paper mill was built not too far from here, on Wissahickon Creek outside of Philadelphia. The year was 1690, and at the time, virtually all paper was made from old clothing and rags. It might have stayed that way if it hadn't been for Frenchman René de Ramure, who in 1719 was inspired to try using wood after watching a wasp build its nest from wood. For wood to be made into paper, it first has to be pulped, a process that starts in a large tower called a continuous digester. Mark Lawyer, a Glatfelter worker with 29 years' experience, showed me how the digester operates.
So this is a computer display what shows you the whole process here?
Yes, sir.
So, Mark, the wood chips come in where?
Up here at the top, right here at the top of the digester.
And then what happens inside that cylinder?
Okay, they're coming down. We want to cook the chip so we can make stock or pulp out of it. So it comes down in through here through 2 cooking stages, down into a washing stage, and then into the blue tank.
So you're mixing some kind of a liquid with the chips?
Yes, sir.
Once I compared the computer image of the digester to the actual tower outside the control room, I was able to see it just as a big pressure cooker. Paper basically begins by cooking wood chips down until just the soft fibers remain in what is called pulp. After the chips become pulp, it's time to remove the black liquor, or dirty water. To see this process, I visited a washing station, and Mark let me take a sample of the pulp out of the washing tank.
Reach in there on the drum.
Put a sample?
Right, we're going to pull a sample out of here. Bring it over to you here. There you go.
That's wood pulp, huh?
Right, that was the chip that we cooked in the digester. Now, if you'll squeeze that, you can see how nice and clean our pulp is.
Clean pulp, you recycle the water?
Right, we recycle the water.
So all those wood chips cooked down into this pulp.
After the pulp has been cleaned, it's sent to the bleaching plant. That's where I caught up with Tom Sent. Tom had to oversee the bleach plant and make sure that it stays on schedule.
So this is the softwood, or you sometimes call it the pine.
The pine or the softwood's the same termination.
Now this is the pulp here. Is it in a bleaching solution right now?
Yes, it's chlorine dioxide and chlorine added to it. Why don't you take a cupful of it and we'll show you what we do with that. Yes, that's it.
So this is the pulp that came up from the digester. It's begun its bleaching process already.
It's begun on the first stage, yes it is. Why don't you take a golf-sized ball out of there and we'll show you what we do with it then.
Just dip my hand in.
Yes, you can.
Now, this is pure pulp.
Yes, it is.
Still kind of yellowish, but really clean.
Yes, it's not in the final stage. It's our first stage.
This is the first stage of the bleaching.
Exactly.
There's several more?
It's 2 more stages, yes.
Okay, can we take a look at the other end?
Yes, we can.
Bleaching is a continuous process as the pulp makes its way through a series of separate washing drums, each with its own blend of chemicals. These chemicals whiten and soften the wood fibers so that they can be turned into clean, white, and firm paper.
So this is the final step in the bleaching process here, huh?
Yes, it is. On the softwood side, it's the final step. It goes from here to our storage tanks, down to the feeder room, then it's pumped into the paper machine.
You're gonna pull a sample out of here?
Yeah, sure.
There you go. So we'll take a sample of this and a sample of this and make do tests on both of these. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Test the brightness and the dirt count on it.
Quite an amazing contrast between how it started out and how it's ended up.
And that's the finished product.
Well, we're at the last stage of the pulping process. That has turned this into this. We're here at the Glatfelter Paper Mill in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. Now, the word paper comes from papyrus, a reed the Egyptians used to make writing materials. But paper as we know it was not started in Egypt. It began in China nearly 2,000 years ago.
There, members of the royal court made a pulp mixture out of mulberry bark, hemp, rags, and water. When they pressed out the liquid and dried the remnants, paper was born.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
To get an appreciation of how paper was first made, I met with Steve Kress, who works in the Glatfelter testing lab. Here, they make single sheets of paper in order to periodically spot check the quality of the pulp. He agreed to show me how to make a piece of paper by hand.
What we need to do first is get a water flow. So if you want to turn that valve on, that brings your water.
Oh, it's
right
coming
now
out from
the
the
water's
bottom.
coming up. Yes.
Up through this, through that screen. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Now you take maybe half of that sample.
Half of this.
Yeah, tear it apart. Now
Okay.
we put it in our bucket here.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead and open that valve a little bit.
We're putting water in there.
Put water in there and
Now
use
we're
our stir there.
making a slurry out of this again now.
Yes.
Very thin.
Yep.
Thin enough, you think?
Yeah, that should be good. Okay.
Wow, I can't even see it. Disappeared.
There you go.
Look at that. It's like cloudy water now. Okay.
That's good. Okay, what you want to do now is close your lid on
This lid?
That lid there. Bring that down.
Oh, that's heavy.
This container has a fine mesh screen in the bottom.
Screw this down.
It doesn't have to be real tight.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, now as you see, this is filling up with water.
Oh, yeah, from the bottom.
So you want to get that poured in there.
Pouring all this in here.
Yep, pour it all
Okay.
in. Okay, now hit your valve up quick with your
Here?
foot.
Up.
Up, and watch the water go
Oh
down.
my gosh, the water just
Everything's-
right out the bottom.
Everything goes
And
out
it
the
left-
bottom.
It left all the pulp right in the bottom. My
that.
word.
Lift it
That's
up.
how it's done.
There it is. There's
That's
your
a
sheet.
That's a sheet of paper.
Now all we have to do is get the excess water out of it.
To remove the excess water, I placed a piece of felt on either side of the paper and then ran it through what was essentially an antique clothes wringer. Then I carefully removed the paper and placed it on a hot plate to evaporate the remaining moisture.
Okay, bring your lid down.
After a few minutes, we had a beautiful piece of handmade paper. Now that I know the process of making a sheet of paper by hand, I was ready to check out the paper machines and see how paper is made in much larger quantities. Today, there are over 1,300 different grades of paper. To make each one, a recipe has to be concocted that blends specific amounts of soft and hard woods. This is done in the beater room. Here, beaters, some of which are 100 years old, mix the hard and soft wood pulp, not unlike giant cake mixers. I learned how they work from Richard Stevens, whose job it is to make the proper blend of wood pulp.
This the recipe?
That is your recipe for the beater you're about to make.
800 pounds of pine.
Right. In other words, open your pine valve.
Right here?
Right.
All the way?
Right.
As the pine or soft wood pulp poured out, Richard showed me how to gauge the amount with the levels on the side of the beater tank.
So I want to go up to the second block.
Right.
Okay, so I'm at the top of the first block now. And I'm at the top of the second block. Okay, it says now 400 pounds of recycled.
Right. You open this valve.
This one here.
We added 1,600 pounds of hardwood and then another 400 pounds of softwood pulp made from off-color paper produced at the plant. As we did, the beater started working it all into a homogeneous blend.
So all of our ingredients are in here now. We just have to allow this to mix.
Right. This will mix for approximately an hour.
1 hour.
1 hour.
Then it's ready to empty out.
Right.
How long have you been here?
34 years.
And how much has this process changed during that time?
This hasn't changed a day since I've been here.
Really?
Right.
And what about this machine? How old is it?
This machine dates back to 1889.
When the mixture was completed, it was piped over into the next room and into the paper machine.
This paper machine was installed in 1889. Not 1989, but 1889. It's been running virtually around the clock for more than a century. A testament both to its engineering and to the care given it by its operators, like Charlie.
The first stage of the paper machine is called the Fourdrinier. It's a conveyor made up of a wire screen that constantly revolves. It was amazing to see this screen in such a large scale compared to the screen I used to filter one sheet of paper by hand. As the pulp is pulled along the screen, the fibers line up and the water drains through the bottom. This was when I really could see the sudden change from pulpy liquid transforming into paper. From the Fourdrinier, the paper goes through a series of presses and dryers, which heat the paper and remove any remaining moisture. The finished paper rolls off the end of the machine, having gone from liquid to solid in only a matter of minutes.
Okay, and then here we come off onto this roll over here. This is the finished paper, huh? This is finished paper. It's wound up. When we're at the end of this machine, this is made, this is our final stage. We wind up anywhere from a 30 to a 50 diameter roll. From here, it's taken to another machine called a rewinder. There, it's cut into smaller rolls, and then they are shipped to our customer. Well, that's beautiful. It's incredibly smooth. Yes, it is.
After seeing the paper-making process, I didn't realize just how dangerous it really could be until I saw how the machine operators have to periodically reload the rollers when beginning a new batch. They restart the process by spraying pulp only a few inches wide onto the four-grenier screen. Then carefully and quickly transport the wet paper from the screen to the rollers. As workers thread the rollers, the spray's width is increased to the full width as the paper strip continues through a multitude of rollers and dryers. All the while, the workers must be extra cautious to keep all clothing and body parts clear of the machinery. One could only imagine the damage one of these rollers could do. Finally, the paper is started onto the roll at the end of the machine. I can say this job is very hard and potentially dangerous work. Once the load is started, workers continue checking the paper for a smooth roll between the steam-heated 250-degree dryer drums. When this machine was installed over a century ago, it was state-of-the-art. But it pales in comparison to the modern paper machines located just upstairs.
We're here at the Glotfelter Paper Mill in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. Now, earlier, we made paper by hand, one sheet at a time. Then we used a machine made in the 1880s. Now we're going to get up to speed and up to date as we take a look at the state of the art.
Although the process of going from wood pulp to paper has remained almost unchanged over the last century, the one thing that has radically revolutionized the industry is the size and speed of paper-making machines. Here are two paper machines, each capable of producing over 600 miles of paper a day. That's more than 12 tons of paper an hour at speeds in excess of 2,400 feet a minute. They're overseen by Phil Keener, the mill manager.
I've got a question for you. Downstairs, just below us, you've got a machine down there that was made in the 1880s. You're still using it. And you've got this. Why both?
A multiple customer base. On the small machines, we have a dedicated number of customers who run small orders, small volume size. To produce their papers efficiently, we need to have the small machines. And then we have another customer base, very large volume, and they need the efficiencies that a larger machine can provide.
From here, the paper goes to the finishing room, where it's run through either the cutter or the precision sheeter. Rick Kohler showed me how this huge guillotine works.
So, Rick, at this point, we've got how many sheets of paper now sandwiched together?
We have 3 right here at this point, Ron.
And this is where the cutting begins to take place?
This is where the slitting, we call them slitters, and yes, it is where the cutting takes place. We're cutting the width of that sheet that's going to be sheeted.
Okay. And so each one of those round discs there is actually a cutting blade.
Right, you can see the cutting blade sticking out the bottom.
Yeah. All right, now how does it get cut to length?
Okay, then it's going to come over to the cutter, which is on this barrel. As this barrel rolls around right here, Ron, it's the orange barrel here, has a knife on it. That knife goes to the length, or the width, I should say, of that barrel. And as that comes around, that's going to make a clean cut.
So what's happening here, Rick?
Actually, this is where the sheet is coming out and being put onto the skid.
So these are our slotting cuts right down here.
That's exactly
they cut it
right.
to width. And I guess if you look in the top there, we can see they're kind of overlapped at this point.
Right, they're overlapped coming in, and then they jog up to the back. But as you see, they're nice and straight. The skids are stacked real nice and straight.
These machines produce paper for everything from books to playing cards to Post-it notes.
So this is pretty typical of the sheets that would come off the precision sheeter over here.
That's correct,
Big
Ron.
machine.
That's what it would look like.
But even though a lot of these things leave here as sheets or rolls, that's just the beginning.
Right, Ron. A lot of our products go out and they become other things. Some of them are converted into stamps. Another thing would be greeting cards.
Rolls and rolls, stacks upon stacks of sheet paper, all essentially the product of wood and water. Soon, all of this will be converted into thousands of paper products that we use every day.
Despite the best efforts of the digital revolution, it's impossible to imagine a world without paper. After all, paper lets you relax in a tranquil setting and enjoy a good book. Sit down and write a love letter, and sometimes just plain goof off. I'm Ron Hazelton. Thanks for watching Hands on History.